Joined on the phone today by John Pirozzi. He is the director of the film Don't Think I've Forgotten, Cambodia's Lost Rock and Roll. How are you today, John?
I'm doing great, Dustin. Thank you.
It's great to have you on, and I've always been interested in the history of Cambodia and kind of what your film is about. Maybe some of the listeners don't realize, though, kind of the stuff that went on around the mid-'70s. Can you tell us a bit about the film?
Yeah, the film is really tells the modern history of Cambodia, but it's always through the perspective of Cambodian rock and roll and Cambodian music. And both aspects of the story are very interesting because Cambodia has a very rich history and a very interesting history, and the music was fantastic. So for us, it was just a matter of putting the two together and finding those points where they sort of came together and made the film sort of with that idea in mind.
So is it just the music that got you interested in making this film, or what led you to want to put this together?
Well, I think it was also my interest in the history of the country, as well, because Cambodia had been a very special place right after the Second World War. It had gained independence from France in 1953, and it was a very peaceful and beautiful place until the war in neighboring Vietnam started to heat up. And ultimately, Cambodia got dragged into that. And, I don't know how much your listeners know about the Khmer Rouge, but in 1975, the Khmer Rouge took over Cambodia. They were a Maoist, radical extreme group, and they imposed some pretty horrific ideas on the country. One of them being that anything modern or Western influence had to be outlawed and banned. So the music certainly fell into that category.
Yeah, and it seems like that's something maybe a lot of Americans don't realize. You probably don't hear a lot about it in school. Do you think it's because, America had some involvement in that? Is that why we don't hear much about it?
Well, yeah, it's that, and also, Cambodia, when the Vietnam War is taught, I think Cambodia is sort of part of the story, but certainly not the focus for Americans, and although it should be, because I think arguably Cambodia suffered greater than any other participant in the war. And I think also, people will say that after the Vietnam War and after our involvement there, a lot of Americans really didn't want to think about that part of the world anymore. It was such a debacle for us that we sort of turned away from it and really didn't look at it and analyze it and perhaps in a way that we should have.
Yeah, it is crazy to think, especially since it was so recent in our history. It kind of would be like if America went out and the government, assassinated Beyonce, and some of these top artists that we have here.
Yeah, I guess that is a good analogy, and it's sort of very hard to imagine that happening. But, I think one thing I learned from making this film is everything is very fragile and anything is almost possible. And also for me, Cambodia for a lot of people is only a set. When people think of Cambodia, they don't really think about poverty and war and genocide. But before all that, there was this really great moment in Cambodia's history where this incredible music flourished, and it was an incredible culture as well as far as architecture and art. So that's something that a lot of people obviously don't know about, and it was something that I'm really happy to be able to bring out to the fore.
Yeah, most definitely. Again, we're on the phone today with John Pirozzi and talking about his new film, Don't Think I've Forgotten, Cambodia's Lost Rock and Roll. And I got to assume, considering what took place, it must have been difficult to track down some of these surviving artists when you were putting the film together.
It was difficult a little bit at first, but then I partnered up with an organization in Cambodia called the Documentation Center of Cambodia, and they really helped us a lot because they're the ones who've been putting together the history of what happened under the Khmer Rouge. They've sent people out into the far reaches of the countryside and interviewed thousands of people about their experiences, and so they had a great network for us to work with and to plug into.
So when you were able to track down some of these people, were they pretty open about sharing some of these experiences?
Yeah, I think for the most part, people were. I mean, you have to remember that their identities were completely scrambled. I mean, the survivors during the Khmer Rouge era had to pretend that they were other people, that they weren't musicians, that they weren't even city people, in order to survive. So, there had sort of been a big cloud over their memories in terms of a lot has happened to them, and their country essentially was destroyed, and they had to begin life all over again once the Khmer Rouge left power, or were forced out of power, I should say. But I think they were happy to talk about these days when the music was being created, because it was a happier time for them, and the music still is something that Cambodians have to sort of remember and remind them of what the happy time was before the war and genocide happened.
And when it comes to the music, and the soundtrack for the film, was it tough to find some of the music? I know a lot of it escaped, maybe smuggled out on cassette tapes or records or that sort of thing.
A lot of the music survived, but not very much of it survived in good shape. So there's a lot of bad MP3s of tapes. And actually a lot of the music also got remixed in the 80s by Cambodians who had found bad tapes and tried to add other instruments like hi-hats and cymbals and synthesizers and various things to give it a little bit more high-end. But so to find original recordings that were high quality that didn't have any overdubbing, that was tricky. But because the film took a while to make, we managed to put together a really great network of people, and a lot of people just contacted me because they really cared about the music and the country, and they had bits and pieces to the puzzle. So I'm really excited about the soundtrack. I think the soundtrack is, even for people who know the music or think they know the music, maybe the first chance for them to really hear it as it's intended to be heard.
Yeah, that is awesome for sure. And I know that there are still some bands out there, like maybe take a Dengue Fever or a group like that are keeping that kind of music alive. Is Cambodia itself, is it kind of back on track and things back to normal?
It's certainly better now than it's been in quite a while. But you have to think about if you took America and basically executed 90% of the artists, people who could read, people who could, down to auto mechanics, could fix cars, and then what are you left with? I think it's been difficult for them, and I would have to say that now there's a really great new young generation there who didn't go through the Khmer Rouge, who are very open to new ideas and really want to be part of the modern world again. So it's sort of beginning to have this sort of second renaissance in a way that is really nice to see, actually.
So did you spend a lot of time in Cambodia when you were putting this film together?
Yeah, I've been there. Well, the first time I went was 2001. I was there as a camera operator working on a movie that Matt Dillon directed called City of Ghosts. And that trip sort of really opened my eyes to the history of the country and then to the music eventually. But now I've been there, I think it's almost 11 times. I sort of lost track. I go back almost every year and a half to make the film. It really required a lot of time and patience because so much of the history had been lost, the music and finding people and piecing it all together. I mean, the film really attempts to tell the story not just of the history of the country, but the music scene they had was very large and complete and had many different facets to it. And I wanted the film to sort of show that, but that required a lot of research and a lot of time.
Well, it's great that the film was completed. I know you have some screenings going on now, and you have one coming up in September in Minneapolis. For people who maybe can't make those, will there be a physical release, or maybe you can get it online somehow?
Yeah, sure. In the fall, we'll definitely be coming to iTunes and eventually to other platforms as well.
And is there a website or maybe some place you'd tell the listeners to head to if they need more information?
Yeah, the website is DTIF, which is the acronym for Don't Think I've Forgotten, DTIFCambodia.com. We also have a Facebook page, which is really up to date with everything that's going on, too, which I think if you just Google Don't Think I've Forgotten Facebook, you'll find it.
Excellent. Well, again, John, I really appreciate you taking some time out. This is very tragic, but also a very fascinating story, and looking forward to this film, Don't Think I've Forgotten.
Yeah, thank you. And, ultimately the music is still here, so as tragic a story as the music is still around for people to enjoy. So, but thanks for having me.
And again, that was John Pirozzi. He is the director of the film Don't Think I've Forgotten, Cambodia's Lost Rock and Roll.